All right, everybody have a seat, please, and turn off your cell phones. Thank you all for coming out on this very cold night. I'm Hannah Tiblier. I'm the chairman of a group called the Powell League. And are we going to have Eliza up there? We're going to have Eliza up there. All right. Anyway, the Powell League is named after Eliza Powell, who is the woman who Benjamin Franklin, she stopped him as he was leaving the Philadelphia State House and said, "Dr. Franklin," after the convention, and said, "What have you given us?" And his reply, of course, was, "A republic, if you can keep it." So the Powell League is a group of women, we have some men, who we have studied the Constitution, we've studied all kinds of things, and to see what we can do on a grassroots level to keep what is left of our republic in this country. So anyway, and I'm the chairman, I'm Hannah Tiblier. The women with red name tags are in the Powell League. So if you have any questions or want to join us, we meet on Thursdays from 10 to 12. Anyway, so thank you for being here. I do want to say I do have a little bit of bad news, and that is that two of our speakers are sick. Steve Gill sends his regrets, and Linda LeBron, who is our English language expert, longtime teacher, also is not able, she is under the weather also. So, but we're going to muddle through this, and we'll probably do this in a few more weeks, either in maybe Cottonwood or Fieldstone Farms, maybe over to Ravenwood, so West Haven. So there's another, there'll be an opportunity to come and hear what they have to say. We're really sad that they were not here. They give a great insight into their specialties, but they're under the weather. Okay, before we get started, I want to introduce the public officials who are elected officials who came tonight to see Charles Sargent. He is the representative from District 61. And Jack Johnson, Senator Jack Johnson, thank you for coming back. And Glenn Cassida, thank you, Glenn, for coming. Glenn is the caucus chair of Republicans, and so this is not his district, but he was kind enough to come because he is the caucus chair, and that's why we do. And pardon? And he's a Williamson County guy. And he's a Williamson County guy. Okay. So anyway. Upon suggestion from the last forum that we had over in McKay's Mill, some people wanted to have kind of a, what is this Common Core thing and how did it get started? So I'm going to attempt to give just a brief synopsis, and you legislators and anybody else, if I misspeak or say something that's not correct, I want you to correct me because I want to be completely, totally correct. So it started, first of all, I think it's rather disconcerting that you can completely take over the education in this country and nobody know about it, pretty much. I had never even heard of Common Core until last spring when my son's grades started dropping and he started becoming very unhappy at school. And when I asked the teacher why they were teaching two-digit multiplication like this, she said, because it's Common Core. And I said, what is that? Anyway, so Common Core is the name of a set of standards, not curriculum, but standards that were written by a group of people, non-elected people, they at a think tank over in D.C. Not classroom teachers. The chief architect is a fellow named David Coleman. And there's also Jason Zimba, and the third person is a woman, and her name just escaped me. No, that's not her, but she's in it. Linda Darling Hammond. She's contributing to it, absolutely. So anyway, so it was written by three unelected folks, educrats, you might say. And what happened was when President Obama was elected the first time, the recession was going on, the bubble had burst. You all recall how pleasant it was in the United States in about 2009. So when they did the first stimulus package, they set aside, I think it was 4.3 something billion nationally towards education, and this stimulus, 4.35 billion, was going to go towards education. So the newly appointed Secretary of Education, a guy named Arnie, whatever you say, Duncan, came to the then Governor, Phil Bredesen, and said, in essence, we've got a check for $500 million with a B, dollars for Tennessee, and there's going to be this contest, and it sounds not much like a contest because I think anybody could have gotten the money. So you had so many weeks to jump through several hoops to get your check of $500 million. They had to do 3 things to get this race to the top, or as people who've been studying it call it race to the trough. Because when they started finding out how much money their counties were going to get, people, started paying attention and saying, well, maybe this isn't so bad after all. But they were saying there's 3 things that have to happen in the state of Tennessee. Number 1, you're going to have to change the teachers' pay structure so that their paycheck is based on what their students' scores are on the TCAPs, or whatever the test gets changed to. Well, that went really well with the teachers. Wink, wink, no it didn't. And another thing they said was you're going to have to establish a statewide data collection service, a database, because to do so federally violates federal law. There's a law called FERPA, and it calls for privacy for all the students. Especially even, they can get aggregate data like this many students do, but you cannot have any personally identifiable data collection. So they told the states, you have to establish and start collecting all this private, confidential, very sensitive information on the students. And the third thing you have to do is come up with brand new standards that are rigorous and things like that, and you've got, 6 weeks to get all this done? Well, nobody's going to rewrite their K through 12 standards in that few weeks. Of course, it's absolutely impossible. So then it was, well, there's these standards that are being written over near DC right now called Common Core, and they're ready, so they're just about ready. So you could do that, and that way you can win the contest and get your check for $500 million. So I'm sure, I would hope Phil Bredesen would have said, well, let my people take a look at these standards and see what they look like. Well, they're not written yet, but you have to go ahead and sign on the dotted line that you're going to use them sight unseen so that you can get your check. So, from what I understand, gentlemen, correct me if I'm wrong, there was a special session called of the General Assembly for the legislators to vote. Do we want to go for this race to the top? Do we want to do all these 3 things that we're saying that they have to do? And they said yes. Is that correct, gentlemen?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, just making sure. Anyway, so Common Core, like I said, is a set of standards. It's not the curriculum. But let's be real, we all know that what you teach is based on the standards, what you're going to be tested on, what you're going to be evaluated on. So some people say, well, it's just standards. Well, that's, what's the word?
Hogwash.
Yeah, that would be good. Because the teachers are going to teach what their standards are so that they can get good evaluations and get pay raises. That's just human nature. People want to make as much money as they can. There's no doubt about that. So, anyway, that's how Common Core came about. Does anybody want to add anything? Is anything I said incorrect? Anybody? Okay.
We'll add to it.
Okay, we'll add on, but that is how Common Core came about. When the gentlemen, and not just gentlemen, when the legislators voted, let's do this race to the top, remember, these standards were voted in sight unseen. No one, and these, the three people that, the Common Core standards have never been tested anywhere, never piloted, never field tested on any size of any kind of group of students anywhere, ever. They're brand spanking new. The analogy that I use is if somebody came to you, if you had a business and your business was getting so big and you decided you needed a corporate jet, and somebody said, well, they're making this jet now. It's really great. It goes this fast and, you know, and starts trying to sell you on this jet. And, well, how much does it cost? We're really not sure how much it's going to cost in the end, but estimates up front, oh, maybe about $16 billion or so. Okay, right. Well, what do the pilots say about that have flown it? Well, no pilots have ever flown it. What about the pilots that helped design it? No pilots helped design it. Well, has it ever been flown? No, but they have tested it in a wind tunnel. Okay, well, that's what Common Core is. I wouldn't put my children on that plane. Would you put your children on the Common Core plane? That's what's happening. So never tested, never piloted, don't know how much it's going to cost, you know, when it all shakes out. You know, and no classroom teachers. Now you'll see talking points that have come down that says that the teachers helped with it. Well, let me tell you about two of the main teachers. The two. Dr. Sandra Stotsky from the University of Arkansas is the English language arts expert, and Dr. James Milgram from Stanford is the mathematics expert. They both handpicked them to come and give their endorsement and signature approval from these two experts. And when the two of them got a hold of the standards and started looking at them, they said, under no circumstances will we approve this. This is, and I don't want to go on, but if you were to Google Dr. Sandra Stotsky and Dr. James Milgram, you will see under no circumstances are they in any way accepting of these Common Core rigorous standards, which if you've seen them, they're not rigorous. And sometimes I've looked at the standards, I downloaded them because I just wanted to see what they look like, some of the grades. And sometimes it's not so much what's in there, it's what's not in there. Huge chunks of history and all kinds of math stuff that Julie is going to go into specifics. So I want to see if there's anything else I wanted to say. So that's kind of the history of how Common Core got in. So then we changed governors. Bill Haslam brought in Kevin Huffman, I think from the DC area. Kevin Huffman was a Teach for America lobbyist, CEO, what was his title there? Anyway, Teach for America is a group that Michelle Rhee started it, R-H-E, I don't know if you all know her, but she was kind of the star of that documentary, Waiting for Superman. And, but what they do is they take college graduates that maybe perhaps haven't found a job or found a job in their area, whatever, and they put them, from what I've read, please correct me if I'm wrong, a 6-week crash course on how to be a teacher. Now these teachers that have taught for years and years and have all these degrees, you know, and then you've got a Teach for America teacher that comes in and gets a crash course for 6 weeks. Is it possible that there could be a great teacher that comes out of Teach for America? It's possible. Not likely, but it's possible. And as a matter of fact, one of my children at the local middle school had one last year, and it was awful. I won't say the person's name, it doesn't matter, he's now gone. But we ended up spending a lot of money on a tutor because he literally couldn't make a syllabus, couldn't stick to it, the children didn't understand him, and it was just chaos. So anyway, I do want to say, but there can be good teachers come out of Teach for America, but it's not likely. Okay, so let me grab this. Steve is not with us. You don't want him here, he's got strep throat and no voice. So we are going to start with the fabulous Audrey Buffington. Audrey is a former Maryland State Supervisor. She's got a Master of Arts in Education, and she is a mathematics expert. And it says here that she's an author, and I don't know exactly the name of what she wrote, but I'm sure she can tell us.
Meters, liters, and grams.
Meters, liters, and grams? Ooh, that sounds good.
It's in their folder.
Excellent. Before you guys leave, we have all kinds of handouts, and Audrey made some fabulous folders in there with all kinds of information on it. So without further ado, Miss Audrey. We've got a whiteboard if you want it.
Oh, I don't need it tonight. Thank you. Last time when I talked to people at McKay's Mills, I had forgotten in my folder to put in my Vita. So the first thing they asked me was, tell me something about yourself. And so the first thing I could think of was, well, I was born on a farm. I learned how to milk cows at an early age. I knew that I didn't want to be a farmer's wife, but I wanted to be an educator. And I don't really think that's what they were looking for. So tonight I decided to put my Vita in the folder. You can see what I've written, where I've taught, what I've taught. The main thing I wrote, I guess, was the series, a K-8 elementary math series by Charles E. Merrill. But the meters, liters, and grams that were referred to were a set of metrics books that was kind of my claim to fame. It brought me to Tennessee on numerous occasions. As a matter of fact, the state adopted the books back in about 1975. They also adopted in Nashville my set of algebra models that I had created that are now being used in all algebra textbooks. They draw little pictures of them. They don't actually use the models. So it was nice to have had a chance to visit in Tennessee. I've only been here about a year and a half. Prior to that, I was in Maine when the Common Core first started. And there is such a thing as tunnel vision, and I think I had that. All I could look at was the Common Core standards for math. I didn't look at all the data that was being gathered on the fact that it was going to cost a lot of money on the PARCC tests that were going to be given, any of the fringe things. I just zeroed in on the math standards. And I found some problems with them, and they are in there. There are omissions and errors. You don't need to study them right now. This is for bedtime reading. And I don't think it's going to put you to sleep. It probably will actually irritate you just a little bit to think that we are instilling in our students these kinds of standards when so many things are missing or incorrect, or well, we have problems with them anyway. So I wanted to indicate what some of those things were that you could look at them on your own, but I went through the math standards with a fine-tooth comb. And I said, here are errors, here are omissions. Students aren't taught anything about the calendar, not how many weeks in a year, how many months in a year, what the names of the months or weeks are, anything. They're not taught to read a ruler, they're not taught division by zero. You may not think that's important, but it is when they get to algebra. They are taught very little in percents until the end of the middle school, and then it's only in applying them, but they don't do the 3 cases of percent, which is what we used to call it. They don't do that anymore. There are a lot of things that are missing. And their language is really sloppy. I mean, we used to, many, many moons ago, talk about things that were bigger and things that were smaller. Well, now we look at an elephant being bigger than a dog. But 9 isn't bigger than 6, it's greater than. And we changed all that language a few years ago, but if you'll go back and look at the standards, they have bigger and smaller in there again, and a lot of other language that's just loose and non-mathematical. I consider math a language. If you don't know the vocabulary in math, you're not going to be able to do anything. If the teacher says find the product of 5 times 9, and you add instead and get 14, obviously it's going to be wrong. So the language is really important. The things I want to stress tonight, though, I think are the talking points that the people who say, yes, let's go with Common Core are using. The first one is rigorous. They said the standards are going to be much more rigorous. Sorry, I used a dry erase pen, so the R and I have already practically erased off of this. Not rigorous. What they mean by rigorous is that each child from kindergarten on up is supposed to discuss why or answer why for every question. A mother just told me the other day that she had her son come home and had a problem, something like this. Johnny had 9 apples on the farm and somebody else picked 12 apples. How many apples did they pick all together? It took one complete 8.5 by 11 piece of paper for him to solve the problem, because first he had to write the problem, then he had to write what she called an equation, 9 plus 12 equals, and I said, I'm sorry, that's not an equation, it's an incomplete number sentence. Well, I'm sorry, but they're teaching that it's an equation, and that's been on for a long time. As a matter of fact, our Commissioner of Education, our math coordinator in I was going to say Augusta, because I was in Maine a lot, and I was back and forth from the from the governor's office there a number of times, so I'm sorry, in Nashville, was one of the ones who had been talking to the teachers and saying that those are equations. But anyway, after that, then he had to draw pictures. He had to draw 9 apples and had to draw 12 apples and then had to count them up and say there were 21. Then complete the sentence, 9 plus 12 equals 21. Then explain why he added to get that answer. And then tell what he should have done to get the answer more quickly. I don't know. There was a whole lot of writing he had to do, and the mother said it took one complete 8.5 by 11-inch piece of paper to do this. And the child was extremely frustrated by the end of the session, as was the mother. And in this 15 or 20 minutes it took him, he had solved one problem, and he already knew the answer before he even started. So I'm not sure that we can really say that they are rigorous, because this, by some people, is called the constructivist method, that you go back and construct everything. You don't have to memorize any of the facts until later on, but first of all, you have to try to prove them and explain why. Now, some people call this the discovery approach, or the directed discovery approach. I mean, I've been in education long enough that I've seen every one of these. I will have to tell you this little story, even though it's in your folder. There was a story about a department store that wasn't doing very well, and it kept changing managers, hoping that would work. And with every new manager, he changed everything in the store, moved this department over here and this department over there. And a woman walked in and said, "Please, could you tell me where the drapery department is?" And the young man said, "No, but if you'll stand there a minute, you'll see it go by." Now, I've stood in education long enough, I've seen all of this go by. I've seen direct instruction, I've seen show and tell, I've seen discovery approach, I've seen small groups, I've seen individualized instruction, large group, you name it, we've tried it. And it isn't the standards that makes the difference. And I'm not sure I want to share with you tonight, because that gets outside the realm of what we're talking about, what I consider to be the real difference. But these are not more rigorous. It's simply that they are taking more time, frustrating every child and every parent. Now, when you mentioned that something about the multiplication or the division or something, it says in there that they are supposed to use all of the original, methods that we have used all of our lives for the addition, multiplication, subtraction, and division. However, I find that in some of the textbooks and what some of the teachers are telling me, and parents, that they are not using those tried and true methods anymore, yet that's what the standards say that they are to be using. So I'm not sure what's happening out there. Then they say, "Oh, critical thinking. This is great. All of our kids are going to have to solve these problems and be great critical thinkers." Well, it's going to have to happen in something other than math. Because when I went through all the standards and looked at the problem-solving skills, there was very little in critical thinking. It would talk, once or twice it said compare and contrast, I think, or order or something. But when you look up the critical thinking skills, including those in Bloom's taxonomy, for those of you who went to college in the 50s and 60s, almost none of those exist anywhere in any of the math standards. So if they think answering why is going to be critical thinking, doesn't cut it. One other little example, and this is in there, I think, but a mother shared with her first grader came home and had a worksheet, and on one of the lines it said 3 plus 5 equals blank, why blank. And later on she looked at the little girl's homework and she had filled in 8 because. And that was the best she could do, because asking a child to explain or try to discover why 3 plus 5 equals 8 is like asking them, why does G come after F in the alphabet? It's a mathematical fact. It cannot be proven. It can be illustrated with piles of beans or whatever you want to use to show that 3 plus 5 is 8. You can illustrate it, but those things cannot be proven. So we are asking these kids to do things that are just not possible. Another thing they say, they're going to be great problem solvers. Not math. If those things that I was just talking to you mean they're good problem solvers because they can answer why, or they can draw a picture of 9 apples plus 12 apples and say there are 21, there are very few problem-solving strategies in there anywhere. When I was at the State Department in Maryland, we developed a scope and sequence, we called it then, which is the same thing as standards. Each that was to be taught with all the strands of addition and subtraction and whole numbers and fractions and geometry and everything through grades K through 8. We included a problem-solving strand. I did all the research I could on problem solving so that we could include everything that the teachers had to teach so that our students would indeed be good problem solvers. And we came up with 15 or 18 or more. Unfortunately, I still have no list of them because I'm in Tennessee, because my house burned down in Maine, and my daughter said, "Mom, don't rebuild, come down here with us." She lives in Franklin. So the files and everything were all gone, and my problem solving skills are gone, but there were a lot of them. And here we only have a couple. They will say, usually, draw a picture. Now, we have some students who are not great artists, and others who don't want to draw a picture of 9 apples and 12 apples to know that there are 21. And that's about the only problem-solving strategy that's in there. You've heard them talk about our standards here have been a mile wide and an inch deep. Oh heavens, that's been here since the middle 90s. That was with the Third International Math, Science, and Study Group. And when they compared our work with that in Finland and some of the European and some of the Asian countries in Singapore, they said, oh, we didn't do as well as they did on the test because we were a mile wide and an inch deep. We covered too many strategies and too many content areas and too many standards and not in enough depth. I suppose they meant depth. We didn't draw enough pictures. I'm not sure exactly what they meant by that. But maybe it's because we didn't quite do enough training of our teachers in the colleges. I'm not certain. But we've kind of given up on that. You don't hear that quite so much, but every once in a while it's thrown out. Not so, and the reason it seemed as if we had a lot of standards is because in 3rd grade textbooks there was 1 page on perimeter. In 4th grade there was a page on perimeter. In 5th grade there was a page on perimeter. In 6th grade there was a page on perimeter. When I tutored 10th graders in high school, when the question would be, find the perimeter of this rectangle, they would say, do I add or multiply? So we needed a lot of work on perimeter. What would have been much better was to take 1 whole week or 1 whole chapter in 3rd grade on perimeter until they really knew it cold. And then you don't have to reteach it every year after that. You save a lot of time. And it doesn't look as if you have quite as many strategies. Oh, they're going to be college and career ready if you need to see this. Well, not so. One of the authors said, thank you. Dr. Milgram from California was mentioned. He was one of the validators. But Dr.
Zed Warman? Okay, sorry.
Oh my gosh, I've written to him and called him so many times one would think you know. He's the lead author of the math standards. He was born in Australia, came here to go to school at Harvard, met a woman whom he married, stayed here, and I'm not sure if he's a citizen or not. I've not been able to find out, but he primarily was the author of the whole thing. And he and 2 of the people who worked with him, neither of whom taught math or worked with the elementary schools, said they're college, that these are supposed to be college and career ready, but they admitted themselves that our kids will not be able to graduate from high school and be prepared to go to college and be ready to go into STEM areas, which is science, technology, engineering, and math. One of the reasons is because we don't go beyond Algebra 2 in our standards in the high school. That's it. There are no standards for calculus unless they are added by some of the states, and Florida has just recently decided they're not going to call it Common Core. They've added, I think, 78 standards. Many of them have to do with calculus and higher level math because their students would not be prepared for that. But the standards are copyrighted by the National Governors Association and the state school, the Chief Council of State School Officers, which are primarily the superintendents of all the schools in all the states. They are copyrighted by those 2. It's the only time that anybody knows of that anything has been copyrighted in education by non-education groups. And we cannot make any changes at all, period, none. If you want to make a copy of a page, you have to get permission to even do that. You may add up to 15% additional items in which case you and your state are responsible for assessing those. But you may not change a single word, not the sequence, not anything in the Common Core standards.
All right, are you trying to think of Dr. Jason Zimba?
No,
No, okay.
I'm trying to think of, his name will pop out in
It's
the
all
middle
right, it's
of
okay.
a sentence. And as many times as I've spoken and written to him, you'd think I know. Probably I've forgotten because of that. There may be a reason. That's right. Now, some people have said, if you are against the Common Core standards, then you're against good education. You don't want our kids to improve. I made a real big mistake when I was testifying before the Senate subcommittee. I was so new to Tennessee, and I had been sitting there for 7.5 hours. I hadn't even moved. I didn't stand up. I didn't go to the bathroom out for lunch, a sandwich, or anything. And when they finally called my name, I wasn't sure I could stand up, but I did. And when I